Hello everybody, Alan Stout here from the Music on the Menu radio show, and I'm doing one of our podcasts from home. I started doing these for the first time during the COVID-19 pandemic, and ever since then, periodically, I will continue to do them. We'll talk about rock documentaries or things going on in music that sometimes I don't have enough time to get into on my radio show, because I'm trying to pack in as many tunes as I can for you every Sunday night into that hour. And so this gives me an opportunity outside of blogging and occasionally still contributing an article to some newspapers to just talk a little bit about what's going on in music. And I wanted to talk a little bit about last night's big We Are Not Alone show that happened at the Front Street station in Northumberland, featuring three of the former core members of Breaking Benjamin. I wasn't planning on podcasting about it. I just went down with a friend to check it out and enjoy myself. But I guess sometimes when you covered music for newspapers and for so many years, it's very difficult sometimes to just come home and say, oh, that was fun. You know, there's always this, I guess it's been in my blood now for 30 plus years that, I have to write about it or I have to talk about it. And so that's why podcasts are cool. And so we'll talk a little bit about last night's concert. Full disclosure, I've known the Breaking Ben guys for a long, long time. The former Breaking Ben guys. And some of the current Breaking Ben guys, obviously. The first time that the band was ever profiled in a newspaper was in my Music on the Menu column. That was back in 2000. I know I've told the story before. They didn't even have it. This is when it was Ben, Jeremy, and Bug. They didn't even have a band picture. So they came down and we took it on the roof of the Times Leader. The first Breaking Ben official band shot, I guess, was taken on the roof of the Times Leader on North Main Street in Wilkes-Barre 26 years ago. Later, when Mark and Aaron came on board, I got to know them even better. And one of my favorite pictures of the band from that era was actually also taken at the Times Leader. That was taken in the basement of the TL, and I think that was in 2002. And I call it the subway photo because it has a real urban look to it, and it looks like we're in a subway. I'll post a blog that I wrote in the comments, I'll throw the picture up in the comments so that you could see the picture I'm talking about. And so you're just going back a long time to the Voodoo Lounge, to seeing being down there on Thursday nights where there's 25 people, and then having to see them get their record deal when they got signed. We did articles about all of that. When their first record went gold, we had it on the front page of the newspaper. Concert for a Cause. They came down and played the show. They did a free charity show, even though they were enormous at the time. And I know Aaron was really the one that helped make that happen, because I reached out to Aaron and he said, I'll see what I could do, and they did. And, I don't forget stuff like that. And so, and even going back to just a couple of years ago with the Luzerne County Arts and Entertainment Hall of Fame, I was on the entertainment committee that talks about the candidates and the nominees. Pretty engaged in those conversations every year, except for last year where they threw me out because they were voting on me. And so I wasn't as involved last year as I am in some other years, but because they were kind enough to elect me into the organization. But the first year, I felt very, very strongly that Breaking Benjamin, along with the Badleys and the Boys and Jimmy Harnan, belonged in that inaugural class. They belonged in the very first class of the Luzerne County Arts and Entertainment Hall of Fame. And I remember saying to the committee, and I got no pushback on this from anybody. Obviously, they got voted in easily. But I remember saying, is there any other band in from Wilkes-Barre that has sold 19 million records. And so, that's just something, going way back with those guys, and experiencing the joy, seeing them succeed. When they played the arena for the first time, I was the editor of The Weekender at the time, and we made it our cover story. And I remember going up to the arena, and I wanted to get a picture of their name on the marquee with the arena in the background. And I got it, but I had to go up 3 or 4 times to get the right lighting because the sun was washing out the marquee. And I finally got a beautiful picture. I think it was around 7 o'clock. And I had that blown up, and I gave it to all the guys as a gift. And when I see them around today, sometimes it'll come up, and they still have it. And so, again, just full disclosure, there's been a lot of stories that I've written about Breaking Benjamin over the years. And also, full disclosure, I haven't written one in probably 15 years. Because when the band started to get fragmented, that relationship, just like it did with the guys in the band, I guess, it didn't maintain. And so I was excited about this show. And I want to thank Travis, the promoter, who put this whole thing together last night. He reached out to me a couple weeks before Christmas and told me it was in the works. And we were able to announce it on the river. The day that the show was announced, we went on during drive time, during my partner DC Taylor, who produces Music on the Menu. DC's on every day during drive time. So it was a Monday, so we went on the air, and we had Aaron and Mark call in, and we announced the show. And then we invited them to come back after Christmas and for the whole hour on the show and talk more about it, and we did that. And by the time we did that, the show was already sold out. And so, usually when you have guests on your show, you're talking about the upcoming show, and you're playing tunes, and you're talking about the music, and you're interviewing the musicians about how this whole project came to be. And we did all that, and it was a lot of fun. But we did not have to talk about tickets because they were already gone. And so that tells you how excited people were about this show that happened last night in Northumberland. Aaron has been a really prolific musician since then. Since he left Breaking Benjamin, I think he's put out 5 albums. I've written about every single one of them. He's been a guest on the show for every single album that every time Aaron drops a record, he comes in and we play a whole bunch of tracks and we talk to him about it. Done some newspaper articles about it. And it's kind of funny because my kids are in their late teens now, and so they're familiar with Breaking Ben. And my son is familiar, obviously, with Blow Me Away from Halo. And I get cool points with the kids sometimes because AJ was talking about the guys from Breaking Ben. I'm like, yeah, I've known them a long time. And he was talking about Blow Me Away, and I said, well, the guy that plays that great riff in that song, he sat right there. And I pointed to the couch in our living room because one of the interviews that I did with Aaron was right here at my house. And so, it's I think we all sort of feel that pride. There's so many people from this area that have gotten to know these guys over the years. And when we saw them succeed on a national level, we were rooting for them and we were pulling for them. And if you got to know them personally a little bit, then you knew that they were good guys and they were nice guys, good dudes. And so that even made it better. And so last night I went down to the show. My friend Jim, who was actually the lead guitarist in my band when I played a band when I was in college. Second time I dragged Jim out this week. I asked him if he wanted to go see Warren Hayes at the Kirby on Tuesday night or Wednesday night earlier this week, and also asked him if he wanted to go down and see the show last night. And Jim's a guitar player, and so I said, "There's going to be some guitars." So we went down, and we had a great time. And a couple of shout-outs before we get to the music and the show. I'd never been to the Front Street Station before. I'd heard of it because the Badleys play there a lot, but the Badleys usually also play in Wilkes-Barre once or twice a year still, and so I had never gone down to Front Street, but I know that they do really well there, and I could see why. It's a great club. It is so cool. It's an old train station, which, of course, we had a great rock club here, Market Street Square, and the station for years in Wilkes-Barre. It's actually where I work now. It's the Luzerne County Visitors Bureau office. And I had some neat little memories there because the club has train cars as part of the club, just like Market Street Square used to have. And so to be walking through train cars in a bar and watching some of the show from a train car, it was very, very cool. The staff was awesome. Everybody from the bartenders to security to the bouncers, everybody was chill. Everybody was cool. And it's just a great rock club. It's an easy ride from the Wyoming Valley, from Northeast PA. So if you ever head down from Wilkes-Barre or Scranton, it's easy. And the last 10 miles or so of the ride, you're right along the Susquehanna, which is always cool to ride along the river. And so shout out to Front Street Station. Just a good rock club. It was hot in there, but you know what? So what? The rock club is supposed to be hot. Felt good to be in a jam-packed, hot rock bar, at a time of year when it's really not that hot outside yet. But again, shout out to security. If you got a little hot and you wanted to step outside and get some air for a couple minutes, they were like, go ahead. Really cool, really chill. The people that were there, I mean, man, I saw Brian Feist, of course, who, was such a big Ben fan, and just had some nice little conversation with Brian. Mark from the Voodoo Lounge, who helped get the band started all those years ago. I had a long chat with Mark. Freddie from 97.9X. Pat Flynn, lead guitarist for Mere Mortals, and with Aaron Fink and the Fury. Adam Knowlton, who we play on the show with his music. He was there. He had a bus trip of people that went down. He was with his girlfriend, Vicky, who, of course, her father owns Tony's Open Mic Jam, Tony's Wine Cellar. And, I got to know Vicky a little bit through the Jane Jam, unfortunately, 9 years ago when her friend Janet passed away from M80. But, Adam and Vicky were there. The wives, got to see Aaron's lovely wife and Mark's lovely wife. I met Baxter's wife, the dude who was singing. She was there. EJ, the sound technician, who's been with the guys forever. Got to catch up with EJ. And so this is what's cool about when these shows happen like this, because, the people come out. Dustin Douglas was there. So, two great guitarists in the audience, Pat Flynn and Dustin are there to check this out. And I got chatting with Dustin for a minute, and, he had just been down to Graceland for the first time in Sun Studios. I guess he maybe swung through Nashville because he said he bumped into Bob Lewis, and we got talking about Bob Lewis and Mike Miz and some other guys that are in Nashville. And I said to him, I'm so happy that everybody's doing great. I said, everybody's just doing great. Everybody's out there playing and making music. And, here we are tonight at this show, and these guys are gonna have a great night. You're doing great with the Electric Gentleman and the stuff you're doing. And Dustin looked at him and he goes, hey, we're all your kids. And, I'm not that much older than you guys, but it's true. I wrote about all these bands coming up, and here we all are now in middle age. Dustin's probably not quite. He's the baby still. But, and everybody's doing great. Everybody's out there doing stuff. And so, I'm proud of you all. So proud that everybody's out there still plugging away. The music industry got changed, and we don't have that scene that maybe we used to have. But everybody's out there, and they're navigating through it, and they're making music, and they're making a living doing music. And so, it was great. And so, Dustin, I'm proud of all my kids out there. It was really cool. I got to say a quick hello to Aaron and Jeremy before the show. I saw Mark real quick. He walked by, gave me a hug. But when I went to the backstage area, Mark was still out mingling among the crowd. And so I hung out with Jeremy and Aaron for a bit. And as people that were known each other a long time, mostly talked about our kids. Hey, how are your kids doing? How's yours doing? How's Gavin doing? Gavin was actually Aaron's guitar tech last night, which is so cool. Jeremy said that because he left the band a long time ago, his kids had never seen him play this type of music before. And so he was excited about that. And so, little things that maybe some of the fans might enjoy hearing if you're listening to this podcast, that there are some things going on there, even with the guys, where for Jeremy, that was the first. And Aaron having his son, working with him on the gig. And so, it's just another reason why doing something like last night was special. Let's get on to the show itself. I love this show. And we'll start with Baxter, who's from South Carolina, and I believe it was Travis, the promoter, who found Baxter and then reached out to Mark, Jeremy, and Aaron about doing this show. He was terrific. He sounds like Ben, and hey, if you're gonna get up there and do 90 minutes of someone's songs, that's important. And so, check that box big time. He played guitar, and so he bolstered the sound with some rhythm, while Aaron, of course, held it all down, with not only, playing the lead guitarist in the band and playing the leads, but, obviously Aaron's guitar sound is just an enormous part of those early Breaking Benjamin records. But to have Baxter also, bolstering that sound a little bit with some rhythm, that's a plus. And so, you want to check some boxes here, folks. Singing, check. Adding a little bit to the guitar, check. Just like Ben Burley would do with Breaking Benjamin. He was personable. He did things that you might not see at a Breaking Benjamin show, to be honest with you. He gave a shout out to Aaron's son, Gavin, for being the guitar tech last night. He made a funny joke. They were playing one of the older songs, and he said, well, if you're old enough to remember when this one came out, you should probably schedule your first colonoscopy. And everybody laughed, and so he had, I thought that was funny, and to Dustin's point earlier about everybody being my kids, I've already had 2, so I guess I am. I'm about 5 years ahead of some of the guys in the band, but he talked about hearing the songs on the radio for the first time. And when he was growing up in South Carolina, I remember the first time I heard this on the radio, and so he was connecting himself to it as a fan, and sharing that with the audience a little bit. Didn't overdo it, didn't talk too much. He didn't go on a 5-minute speech between every song. But, he engaged the audience with some humor and acknowledging his bandmates. You got to remember, this guy's a huge fan. And so this was probably, obviously he's performed before. He's an entertainer. He's a musician. He's been on stage probably 1,000 times. But these were his guys. This was a band he loved. And so he probably was nervous. He settled in really quickly, and he really did. And so, you got to give him a lot of credit for getting up there and doing what he did last night. And I thought Baxter was great. Vocals were great, guitar was great, stage presence was great. Engagement with the audience was great. Respect to the other guys was right on target. And so, Appreciate that, as someone that can't imagine how difficult that might have been. The band, I mean, man, Mark and Jeremy, so tight, just so in the pocket. Jeremy is just a monster drummer. I've been hearing that for 25 years now. I remember Brett Alexander talking to me, Brett from Badleys, who produced the first Breaking Ben EP. Brett still uses Jeremy for session work when he produces other artists. And so I've been hearing that about Jeremy forever. He's had write-ups in drumming magazines and so forth. He plays all genres of music. And so to see him back there, in the driver's seat, giving this band the kick last night was so cool. Mark, outside of Breaking Ben, he's played reggae music. He's a thumper, man, and he really, he has that whole vibe to him though of nu metal. His stage presence, his look, he's in his element last night. And last night it really felt like, watching them from the outside, I would imagine that playing some of these songs probably made them feel like they were 25 years old, but with the chops of guys that have been playing for 25 years longer. And so they were great back then. They were great players in 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5 when they were doing those records and all those tours with Ben. But throw on 20 more years of playing, and now you've got, all that experience and all that skill thrown on top of what you had before. And the same thing goes for Aaron. He was tearing it up last night. He was terrific. I turned to my friend who went with me, the guitarist, and I said, we had to talk loud. So when I say I talk to somebody, you know how it is when you're talking to somebody at a concert, you're kind of yelling in their ear. But I was like, I love his tone. I was like, how do you even get a tone like that? How do you get that nu metal guitar tone that has so much crunch to it and bite? And he kind of explained it to me, how you do it. And Aaron's the master. I mean, man, he was just crushing it last night. Holding the whole thing down, firing off leads, just musically, everybody crushed it. Charisma. These guys have it. They're not shoegazers. They have presence on stage, and for me, with rock bands, that matters. I like that. I like a band that looks like they're happy to be there. I like a band that looks like they belong there, and I like to see a band that is in their element, playing in front of a lot of people. And that's what I felt when I was watching those guys last night. So, when you look for things when you go to see a show, and like I said, I wasn't going to do this. It was not my intention at all. I was just going to go hang out and watch the guys play. But since I did it, I might as well talk about it. Musicianship was great. Stage presence was great. It didn't matter if they were playing So Cold or Polyamorous or Shallow Bay or Blow Me Away. It was explosive. It was as tight as a dime. I know that they only met Baxter a couple days before the show. They did some rehearsals over at 8 Days a Week, which is not far from the club. Paul Smith from Saturation from the Badleys owns that. Brett Alexander. Paul and Brett used to have Saturation Acres together, and that's where they did the first Breaking Ben record. Paul now owns 8 Days a Week, and Brett actually does a lot of production down there too. At 8 Days a Week, those guys are still like brothers, Paul and Brett. And that's where these rehearsals happened, at Paul's place, 8 days a week. And, considering they only got together for a couple of times before the gig, it was they were as tight as a dime. They were spot on. And so check your boxes, guys. It's all there. And the last thing I want to talk about with the show, talk about the music, talk about the sound. Sounded great. Give EJ a great job on the board. Joy. Just joy. Happy. The guys are happy. The fans are happy. There's people singing along. There's fist pumping in the crowd. There's devil horns going up. I mean, tension free. Just breathe in good vibes. And that was great. Just to see the guys up there having a good time and having so many people have a good time with music that they grew up with. I don't know if it's a one-time thing or not. People have asked, are they going to do more than this? I'm not sure. I think they probably all wanted to see how it went last night. But I will say this, they have every right to do this. They stuck with the records that Mark and Jeremy and Aaron played on, that they contributed to, that they had a part of the songwriting process, that they were part of the sound of those songs. Breaking Benjamin is out on tour right now. Or if they're not out right now, they go out every year or two, and they play these songs. Yeah, Ben Burnley wrote a lot of them, wrote a portion of them, wrote lyrics, but he goes out and he plays songs that Jeremy and Mark and Aaron had a major contribution to. And he goes out and he's been playing them for 15 years without those guys. Last night, those guys played those songs without one of them. But they contributed to those tracks. That great riff in Blow Me Away is Aaron Fink. And so he played it last night on stage in front of a lot of people. And isn't that really what it's all about? Isn't that really what it's all about? Who do the songs belong to, really? They belong to the people. They belong to the people that made them matter. That's what music is all about. That's what a band is all about. Get together, you put together some songs, you go make a record, you hope that it resonates with people. If it does, it's yours for the rest of your life and the people that it connected with. And you have every right to go out and play it. And just as Ben Burley will play those songs on stage that he wrote with Aaron and with Mark and with Jeremy, Mark, and Aaron can go out and play those songs and find a guy like Baxter that could do a good job and represent them beautifully. And so, hats off to everybody involved last night. I had a great time. Band had a great time. Everybody had a great time. That's what music is all about.